Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us in the world today. We're just going to give it a few minutes before we officially get started as people kind of trickle into our room. But my name is Maya. I'm with Campus Life and Engagement. I'll do a little presentation of who we are in just a few minutes. And I'm joined today by Alex, who is going to do
Hello,
a
everyone.
wonderful presentation. So we're just going to give it a couple of minutes for everybody to kind of trickle in, and then we'll get started.
Perfect. Hope everyone's doing well. And if you're already on location in Montreal, hope you're enjoying the nice weather we've been having the last few days.
All right, so I think we can maybe give it maybe one more minute, but start kind of easing into it as people are still joining us today. So I just wanted to, first of all, welcome all of you to McGill. We are so excited to have you join us today for this information session, which is going to be all about budgeting and expense planning. First of all, congratulations on your acceptance to McGill. We hope that you have all taken the opportunity to celebrate this major milestone, and we're really happy to help guide you through your next steps as you're onboarding to McGill. So, as I mentioned, my name is Maya Bishara. I am working with Campus Life and Engagement, and I'm joined today by Alex, who I'll let introduce himself. He's going to be giving you this lovely presentation today.
Well, welcome everyone. So yeah, I'm Alex Avrilas, and I've been giving presentations on personal finance and financial literacy since 2014 at McGill and Outer University. So I'm very happy to have you guys here today, and hopefully we'll learn something new together.
Thank you so much, Alex. If you could just go to the next slide, I'm going to start off with just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So you are going to be muted for the entirety of this presentation to ensure for better sound quality. We are going to be recording this webinar, and the slides from this presentation, as well as the recording, is going to be available to you in the next couple of days. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can use the Q&A function. So make sure to type in your questions in the Q&A. It will be moderated by Alex and myself, and we'll answer some questions as we go, and then leave some questions for the end of the presentation for a little Q&A section. So just a little bit about Campus Life and Engagement, or CLAY for short. We are here essentially to help you build a sense of belonging and connection within the McGill and the Montreal communities. And we do this by helping you prepare for your arrival at McGill and connect you to the resources that you're going to need along the way. So we have this webinar series that we're offering all throughout the summer, to help answer all of your questions as you're preparing to come to McGill. We also have a great team that can be reached for individual appointments if you need them, and they're going to help you navigate resources in your first year, but also beyond. And we have a team of Ask McGill student navigators who are also there to answer your questions, whether it's by phone, email, in person, etc. You will see them walking around campus in August. Once you get here, they have their signature Ask McGill flag backpack. So if you have a question and you spot them, make sure to go ask them. We are also here to help you explore some peer support and mentorship opportunities, such as our new Student Buddy program, which is currently live for application. So if you're interested, please sign up, and we are going to pair you with an upper year student mentor, and they're going to help guide you from a student perspective. And you'll be assigned to a mentor even before you get to campus. So if you have any question as you're preparing to arrive, they can help you there as well. We're also going to be putting on a lot of activities for you. The biggest and most exciting of which is going to be orientation. It's happening from August 26th to August 28th. So make sure that you sign up. Registration for that is also coming soon. Keep an eye out on your applicant portal. There's going to be workshops. There's going to be a welcome breakfast. There's a social mixer. There's a services fair. Lots of great opportunities, lots of great events and resources. Make sure you attend. All right, and that's all for Clay. I'm going to hand it over to Alex to give you the presentation on budgeting and expense planning.
Perfect. Well, so again, one more time, welcome everyone to today's session on financial skills for the real world. So budgeting and expense planning is what we will be talking about today. So if you have any questions at any point in time, feel free, as Maya mentioned, to ask them in the Q&A section, and then I'll get to them. If there's a bit too many questions, and we're kind of falling behind, we'll leave them until the end. I can hang around after the session as well, and you also have my email. I'm just going to go back real quick here. Right here. So alex.gavrila@affiliate.mcgill.ca. You can send me an email even in 5 months from now if you have any particular questions, if you want. And as I will mention near the end one more time as well, until the end of June, I can also set up one-on-one appointments with any of you guys. They're free of charge. We can set up a half-an-hour appointment if you want me to, help you set up a budget, or if you need you have a bit more specific questions, because again, I don't want to have someone ask a very specific questions about their specific financial situation publicly with 50 other students in attendance. That right, that would not be the best place. So again, either send me an email and we can set up a Zoom meeting or something, or we can just chat via email, whichever one you want afterwards, if the question is more specific. All right, so with that out of the way. So I'd like to start off with a quick land acknowledgement. So Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke, is located on unceded indigenous lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. So to learn more about the various indigenous nations that have called various parts of North America their native and ancestral lands, have a look at nativeland.ca. It's a really interesting and eye-opening website if you haven't seen it before. All right, so now that we're talking about budgeting, so the way the session is structured today is actually, I'm going to remove these because I'm not going to be using them. So there we go. Now we can move around more freely. So the way today's section is structured is some of the budgeting basics that I'll be talking to you about. You already know about them. I guarantee you. Some might know more of these things and some might know slightly fewer of these things. My goal is to provide you with a number of resources. And I also have a few short videos that I've recorded the last few years that are linked throughout the presentation today with more specific bits and pieces, right? So if you are more interested in trying to figure out how to compare the best credit cards in Canada, for example, I have a video on that. If you want to compare different checking accounts or savings accounts, I have a video on that. Otherwise, this presentation would take 4 or 5 hours to go through all of that live, right? And again, some of you might not be interested in that because you already have a savings account, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So the point is, we'll start off a little bit basic, if you will, but we will dive deeper and delve deeper in each one of those things. And at the end of the day, again, budgeting is the very first step in getting your financial life in order. Many of you are incredibly smart individuals, and you will just get smarter and even more specialized in your subfields. Some of you might become world experts if you aren't already, depending on what program you're in already, and if you're starting your PhD, for example, or versus your master's, you might have already a bunch of publications in some top-tier journals and what have you. But what I've noticed over the years is that a lot of incredibly smart people are incredibly smart themselves, but when it comes to finances, especially if you're coming from a different part of the world where the banking system operates in a slightly different way or a substantially different way, people will struggle. It's not because you're not smart. It's because you were never shown these things. So budgeting, again, very important. A lot of it is very kind of intuitive, and we'll talk about those things. But once you're able to not spend more money than you're earning and you're able to set the money aside, then you have to decide, okay, what do I do with this money now? What's the best way to make that money, work for you? That way you can actually do the things that you care about, whether that's focusing on your career, whether that's relaxing, getting a bit more time to relax and not have to work overtime, or whether that's spending time with your loved ones, family and friends and what have you, right? So without further ado, let's get started. Here's a list of your largest expenses, and I have a couple of slides that will basically break this down even in further details. So housing in most cases, will be people's largest monthly expense. Whether you're fortunate enough to be able to actually buy a condo, for example, which again, these days, condo prices have dipped a little bit relative to a couple of years ago, but they still increased exponentially since 2019 due to the pandemic. So most people, especially when you're a grad student, not earning all that much money, quite frankly, you're not it's not realistic to expect someone, for most people, to be able to afford a condo, right? Unless you're lucky and you won the genetic lottery and your parents are wealthy and they're willing to gift you a condo more or less, or gift you the down payment for one, right? But realistically, you're probably going to be renting, right? But regardless, even if you're just renting in Montreal, for most people, housing will account for at least 30% of your income. In many cases, that can be closer to 45% plus. Okay, that number is a bit high and it's not recommended. The ideal number should be around 30 to 35%. That's what the experts are recommending. But I'm just telling you, realistically, this is roughly what you can expect, unless you're okay, getting a couple of roommates, or you're moving a bit further away from the downtown core, and so on and so forth. There are certain adjustments that you can make to try to lower those costs, right? Now, one of the first things that you want to probably do, if you haven't looked at it already, is look at various websites that are actually going to allow you to compare and contrast different prices for condos, for apartments, for smaller, bigger, studio apartments, for example. So here's right now, let me just zoom out a little bit so that it'll give us a little bit more info here. Now, again, this is just one website. Let's see if I paste this in. Oh, I forgot to ask you, Maya. If I paste this in chat, can everyone see it, or should I paste it in? Hold on, let me grab this so that way, if you get there you go, so I can hear you.
In the Q&A would be the best place to put it.
Okay, just put it in the Q&A. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry guys, because today we're using a slightly different version of Teams, so I haven't used this one before, so I'm used to just the regular chat. There we go, and let's see, that works. Can everyone see that one? Maybe, hopefully. All right. Anyway, the links will be in the slides anyway. So there we go. Okay, so again, this is just one website. Now, the thing to be very careful about is that if you don't have an apartment yet, and if you haven't moved to Canada yet, and if you're trying to obviously secure some form of lodging before you move here, there aren't many scams, but they do exist, especially on slightly less, shall we say, watched or less policed websites. So there's nothing wrong with Facebook Marketplace. There's nothing wrong with Craigslist or Kijiji, which is a similar website as Craigslist that a lot of Montrealers are using. The problem is those are not as monitored or enforced as something like Rentseeker or Realtor.ca, for example, which are, it's the industry itself monitors those websites and make sure that the listings are real. Okay, so what can happen, and again, this is very rare, but it has happened to international students, and I've heard some of these stories where they basically will do, they're supposed to do a digital or virtual showing, and then the person's like, oh, sorry, something came up, the tenant is not available, I cannot show you the place, but look, here are some nice photos, I can show you even more photos, or maybe we'll do a showing next day, and then there's delays. So if you're supposed to do a virtual showing, and for whatever reason they're not, the landlord or the realtor, whoever is supposed to show you that virtual apartment, is not able to do that, that should be a massive red flag. Again, nothing wrong with having to delay once, okay, there was something that came up, the tenant isn't there, and you're not allowed to just walk in essentially without the tenant's approval. But if they keep on delaying, and especially because you mentioned that you're not in Montreal, you're not on location, the probability that a scammer will take advantage of someone that cannot physically come to the place and knock on the door and be like, hey, can I visit now, is higher. Now, it's very rare that these scams happen, but the way they typically work is they will go to one of these websites that have legitimate listings. They will literally download all the images, clone the listing entirely, sometimes posted it at the exact same time as that same listing is available on a legitimate website. Other times, wait until that listing is no longer available, and then obviously just change the email address and the contact information and pretend as though they are the landlord. Okay. Some websites have started trying to kind of put certain things in place to avoid this. But anyway, long story short, the very first thing you need to make sure that you do is, if you are renting, before you actually see the place, make sure that it's a real listing. And one of the easiest ways to make sure of that is, again, ask for information in terms of the documentation. Make sure that there is a walkthrough done live with you in mind. And I mean, even then, you're not 100% guaranteed that it's safe. But again, I would typically recommend to have a look and double check if that same listing. Do a reverse image search, for example, using Google, using some of the AI tools, the GLM, the LLMs, for example, and just see if that image, that, especially if you're going on websites like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, to make sure that if you find that same listing on a different website, a more legitimate website, that the contact information is the same. Because again, if the contact information all of a sudden is completely different, you know that there's something off there. Okay. Just something to be aware of, because again, students typically will be or international students and newcomers to Canada could be taken advantage of by that way, with someone saying, oh, just give me your first month and first and last month deposit. So you might put a couple of $1,000s down and you never see that money again. Again, rare, but it's not unheard of. So that's number one to be careful with. Okay. Your second largest, as an international student especially, your second, or out-of-province student, your second largest expense will typically be your tuition. Now, some programs are a little bit more expensive than others. Some are substantially more expensive than others. Any of you doing an MBA, for example, will be aware of that. But there are different options here to kind of reduce those costs. Some of you might have gotten some form of entrance scholarships or fellowships. There's also the differential fee waiver for those of you that are international students, and we'll talk about that when we get to those sections. Okay, so again, what the exact percentages will depend, but a lot of students will spend probably close to 20% or more if you're an international student of your income on tuition. Again, sometimes that can be substantially less, especially if you're eligible for the differential fee waiver. If you are not aware of how the differential fee waiver works, is basically what that will do is, for a specific number of countries, if you manage to, if you apply for this and you manage to get one of the differential fee waivers, essentially, it will essentially reduce your tuition to the equivalent tuition of someone, of a Quebecer, essentially, of an in-province student. So you will save between $15,000 and $17,000, sometimes a bit more on that, right? So that's a substantial saving for most of you in terms of tuition, right? So I definitely highly encourage you, if you're eligible for it, to apply for this differential fee waiver, which again, I have a dedicated slide on that, so we'll talk about that shortly. Then the next highest item here would be food. Most students, again, typically spend somewhere between, again, it will depend on your situation, but again, assuming you're just living by yourself, or you're if you have roommates, but your portion of that food, for example, most will typically spend roughly, I would say, between 10 and maybe about 17% of their income on food. Now, the reason why this ranges quite a bit is, as you might have noticed, Canada has a lot of snow for quite a bit of the year. As a result, we will have to be importing quite a bit of our fruits and veg in the winter. Again, in the summer, Quebec grows a lot of it either openly in the fields or in greenhouses. We started building more hothouses since the pandemic. Now, obviously, we used to import a lot of our food from the U.S. We still import a lot of our food from the U.S. However, in recent, I would say in the last year and a half or so, with the Trump tariffs, and a lot of the free trade agreement that we used to have has been sort of, there's a big question mark above it. And quite frankly, a lot of Canadians are very much upset at Trump and the US because of that. And a lot of people have voluntarily started boycotting certain American products. The problem with that is, again, then you have to go further afield. Instead of, getting lettuce and veggies from the southern US in the winter, you have to go to, Mexico, you have to go to Southern America, South America, for example, you have to go to other places, right? Or Central America, for instance. And because of that, again, there's a slight decrease in the amount of food available, and as a result, prices have gone up, and we also have had inflation. So the reason I'm giving you this big range is because certain items have literally doubled in price over the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, and that's not just the case in Canada, it's a global phenomenon. So again, depends on your diet, depends on your dietary restrictions, whether you have allergies, whether you're eating certain things or not eating certain things because of ethics or because of religious reasons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that can vary a lot. But what I can tell you for certain, if you're a vegetarian, if you're vegan, if you again enjoy a lot of fruits and vegetables during the summer, their price will drop substantially. In the winter, they will roughly double or more, and that's the normal cycle. And then now you add trade restrictions or tariffs or whatever else on top of that, prices can jump even more. So just be aware that during the summer months, food might make up 10% of your budget, and in the winter might make up 17 to 20% of your budget. So just be prepared for that. Okay. All right. So then I would say for most students, obviously, if you also happen to have a young family, those of you that are slightly older, and you're moving to Montreal with a spouse, with a child or a couple of children, then obviously transportation might actually be your fourth highest expense. But for most students, typically that falls further down. Again, the reason why having a child typically boosts up transportation is, again, you might have to drop the kids off to daycare, you might have to do all these things. And while again, Montreal is very, especially if you're living relatively close to downtown core, in Montreal, it's very easy to get around using public transit. It has a pretty decent public transit system. I'm not saying it's the best in the world, because it's not, but between the metro and the buses and the light rail system, it's fairly easy to move around the island fairly easily, right? And McGill provides free shuttles between its two campuses. So if you have, depending on what program you're in, you have to go to Mac campus sometimes, you have to be downtown in the downtown campus sometimes, or something like that. Again, there's free shuttle services provided for that. But again, if you have young kids, depending on where you're able to secure a daycare spot, those are quite limited in certain areas and less limited in other areas. And that's a different story for a different time. You can ask me maybe if those of you that applies to, we can chat and via email later on, or what have you. But anyway, long story short, transportation can be costly if you have a car, if you have to drive around, you have to pay for parking and all the, gas and all those other things. Especially, right now things seem like the Iran situation might be solved sooner rather than later. So, number one, I'm not a proponent of war in any part of the world to begin with. So, the human suffering is always a tragedy. But obviously, you also have the impact on gas prices and everything else that just fuels inflation. So that would be a good thing for everyone involved, I think, if things get solved sooner rather than later. But anyway, so unless you're in that category of essentially a student with a kid or with multiple dependents, telecom will probably be your next most expensive category, if you will. And depending on what part of the world you're coming from, in many countries, I'm familiar with European prices, for example. I know in places like France, for example, or Germany, you will have essentially unlimited data plans with unlimited minutes and unlimited everything for a few euros a month, like 5-10 euros a month. There's many companies that will offer something like that. Okay. Now in Canada, and I have a couple of slides specifically talking about telecom prices when it comes to home internet and when it comes to your cell phone plans. Prices have been dropping over the last few years, so that's great. Cheaper and cheaper options are available, but we're still on the more expensive side of things. So some of the lowest sort of bargain basement prices for high-speed internet would be probably around the $45-ish per month plus tax. And also when it comes to cell phone plans, if you want to, at least 10, 15, 20 gigs of data and, minutes for those of you that still use the phone for, talking to people via the phone network, instead of just on FaceTime or on WhatsApp or what have you, that will probably be around $25 to $30. So again, not a huge amount, but it's still more expensive than in many places around the planet, especially relative to incomes. Okay. And we'll talk about exactly why that is and how that works. And again, all these links, these are kind of links to different articles talking about these things. Again, I'm not going to go through every single one of them here. Those of you that are interested in, just click on them, and once you have the links to the slides, and you'll look at that. The next one would be clothing. Again, temperatures in Montreal can swing quite substantially throughout the year. So, for example, during the summer months. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention. If you're not familiar with how it works in Canada, most items when, whether you're buying something at a store, whether you're buying something online, whether you're going to a restaurant, the prices that you see are without the tax. So tax gets added on top of that, right? So it's something to keep in mind. So there's a 5% federal tax, federal sales tax, okay, that gets added. So let's say you're buying something that is $10, okay? You're buying an item that is taxed that is $10, okay? So on top of the price, you also have to factor in that there's a 5% tax on top of that. And then Quebec will also charge a tax on top of this one as well, okay? So as a result, your total tax ends up being essentially, so the provincial tax gets added on top of the 105% total price here, which gives you a total of 14.975. The total tax, because it's tax on tax, ends up being 14.975 in total. Okay, so that $10 essentially costs you $11.50 essentially, because you round those things up. Okay. So there's just something to keep in mind. So same thing with cell phone plans. Now, certain things, unprocessed foods, basic foods, will not be taxed. Certain items, kids' clothing, for example, only get the federal tax, don't get provincial tax, and so on and so forth. So there are certain exceptions. But generally speaking, most items get those double taxes, essentially. Okay? And clothing, again, for kids, have a reduced tax because it's only the federal one that applies, the provincial one doesn't apply. But that's not true for all kids' clothing, but for most kids' clothing. But for adults, both taxes apply. Okay. Montreal in the winter, we typically will get, quite a few days are in the -20, -25 range Celsius. Winters can be windy. When it's windy, you do have wind chill. Wind chill, trust me, when it's -20 outside with no wind chill, it's -20. When it's -20 outside with wind chill, it can drop to -35, -40 sometimes. Okay. -40, even though the temperature is only -27 or -30 or whatever, but the wind chill dropping it to -40 or below, it really makes a big difference. If you've never experienced that type of temperature, trust me, it makes a huge difference. So you definitely want a decent jacket, okay, in the winter. You cannot really go along without a decent jacket in Montreal. And also, gloves, mittens, hat, scarf, and also get yourself a decent pair of boots that has a pretty good grip. Okay, very important, especially for the ladies. Again, I'm not trying to be sexist here or anything, but I know a lot of the ladies, not everyone, but a lot of ladies love the look of the boot a lot more than the practicality. So try to find a boot that you both like the look of the pair of boots that you're buying, but that also has some grip. Okay, just trust me, you'll thank me, especially if you have classes that require you to walk up Peel, okay? Because Peel, again, if you haven't been in person on the McGill campus yet, is a street between certain McGill buildings, just off of the main campus. So you have the bio building that is just essentially west of Peel. And those of you that are essentially in pharmacology and biology, law students will also walk around there as well. Certain medicine classes will also be there for the McMed building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're in any of those programs, you will likely be walking up and down Peel between certain classes, depending on where your classes are located. And in winter, while they do place road salt and gravel and whatnot to make the McGill slope less slippery, there will still be some days where it might be quite slippery. Okay, and on some really bad days, sometimes they will actually attach some ropes to the. It's rare they do this, but I've seen it a few years ago that attach some ropes to literally. There's a big fence along Peel on both sides, so people can actually just help themselves up on the sidewalk, and they're not sliding all over the place. Okay, again, Peel is a very, very steep road. So just something to keep in mind, okay? And in case you're thinking, oh my God, that winter sounds crazy. Well, summer is almost diametrically opposed crazy, okay? This is a screenshot. Last time I gave this presentation was last year on the 6th or 7th of, on the 7th or 8th of June. I don't remember off the top of my head. This was literally a print screen that I've taken of the weather forecast, okay? Last year that I gave the presentation, like a year ago, essentially, okay, for incoming students in the fall semester. And as you can see here, on June 7th last year, This year it's only around 20 degrees today. But last year was 31 degrees, and with Humidex, it was 35, okay, at 3 p.m. essentially. So, again, the humidity does make a difference. So at least summer clothing is not as expensive. But my point is there's a huge swing. July, August tend to be very wet and moist and humid as months, just because, again, Montreal is an island and you're also downwind from the Great Lakes. Now, the Great Lakes are just south and then west of Toronto, obviously. So that's hundreds of kilometers away, but the wet weather travels from there. And then the fact that Montreal is an island, you also have further sort of humidity and moisture in the air. So it can get very sticky, very wet, and very humid in the summer. So important to have a complete wardrobe for the entire year. But again, because of that, at least for the first year or so that you're spending time in Montreal, you will spend probably a bit more on clothing than you might have spent in other parts of the world that are either more temperate, or warm all the time, or cold all the time, because at least then you don't have to buy multiple sets of clothing. And that's actually the other thing too, where I was talking about, if you do have a car and you're counting on the car as that your main way of getting around town, so your transportation costs will be probably around 15% at that point. One more reason why it's actually a bit more expensive in Montreal than in other places is because legally you need to have winter tires. So in Quebec, you need winter tires to have them installed on your car from the 15th of December until the 15th of March, right? So there's no, the 15th of November, I believe, until the 15th of March. So you need to have the winter tires, and they have to be legitimate winter tires. They cannot be all seasons. So you have to essentially, anyone that has a car will have 2 sets of tires with the costs that entail, right? Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as well. So then obviously entertainment, again, this can vary greatly depending on what you're interested in. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do all around town that is free of charge. Montreal has a lot of festivals, especially during the summer. There are some also in the fall and winter and spring season as well. So there are many different venues that you can do that are essentially either free of charge or at a substantial discount. I'll also be talking about the Access Montreal card, which is an amazing card. You pay essentially $8, and it's a rebate card essentially. So if you have that card, in order to get the card, you have to just live anywhere on the island of Montreal. And as long as you live anywhere on the island of Montreal, pay $8 per year, you get this card. And then that card stacks on top of any student discounts that you might have. So there's a whole bunch of museums, sports venues, even some daycares that will have discounts. That the daycares that belong to and day camps for kids that belong to the city of Montreal will have substantial discounts, and that apply to this. And many kind of tourist areas will have substantial discounts with that particular card. So essentially, all you have to do is just go to one or maybe 2 of these venues, and you will have more than made up for the $8 per year that the card costs. And as I said, transportation would fall over here, but it can be, technically speaking, your third or fourth highest expense, depending on your circumstances. Okay. So that was my little overview here about sort of what are the main categories, and now let's kind of break those down in greater detail. One helpful little thing, actually, before I do that, is so some of the original content that I had back in 2014, 2015, when I developed this webinar series, is based on information that is available from the federal government, from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. So this, as you can see, Canada.ca, that's the official Government of Canada website. And essentially, this is a very, very useful little workbook, okay? And again, today, the things that apply to today's session are really the budgeting section and then modules 2 and 3, essentially, okay? Now, I give a series of webinars in the fall and in the spring semester. Obviously, the spring semester is done, so those have gone already. But those of you that want to learn more about some of these subtopics, again, depending on what's available, again, different webinars will be available different semesters. I don't have the list yet of which webinars will be offered to McGill students in the fall semester, but they typically start in late August, early September, and there's usually between 4 and 10 of them per semester, again, depending on many factors, depending on what other offerings McGill has, and there's only so much time, essentially. So they will pick and choose some of these. If they don't offer the ones that you're interested in, because again, I have different webinars that talk about each one of these things, and I go into a lot more detail, obviously, than this booklet. But at the very least, this booklet is incredibly useful for those of you that want to sort of get your finances in order. I'd highly encourage you to have a look at it. Okay. And as a matter of fact, one little exercise that I very much encourage you to do after today's session is essentially look at pages 3 and 4. Okay. So page 3 essentially just again, this data is a little bit out of date. I'm not the one curating this. This is the Government of Canada, essentially. But the numbers that you see here are a little bit out of date. I think they're from like 3 or 4 years ago. So some of the income, because they're giving examples roughly what the average person earns in those particular fields. Obviously, that will vary quite a bit, and incomes have risen a little bit since then. But yeah, so essentially enter on page 3 from memory without looking at anything. Enter, what are your sources of income and how much those are, right? So you enter those numbers here, and then on page 4, it essentially breaks down your fixed expenses versus your variable expenses, right? Fixed expenses, as the term suggests, they're fixed. They're more or less the same from month to month. So typically, your housing costs, so your rent will more or less, or your mortgage cost will be more or less the same month after month. The reason I'm saying more or less is because, again, depending on your living arrangements, sometimes what happens is, again, in most cases, your heating, especially if it's a large building, your heating and your electricity will typically be might be actually bundled with the rent. So you're just paying rent and you're getting heating and electricity included and water included, right? In other circumstances, heating might be included, water might be included, but electricity might not be included. So then obviously for the parts that aren't included, then you have to pay based on how much you're using. So that's why I'm saying it's more or less the same, because depending on the living arrangements, it might still fluctuate a little bit. Also, most people typically pay their Hydro-Quebec. So Hydro-Quebec is basically the electricity provider. You don't have a choice. There's just one. It's owned by the Government of Quebec. And essentially, we have something like 95%, 96%, between 92 and 96% of all of the electricity that is generated in Quebec is essentially hydropower, right? So renewable, clean energy. And then there's about 4 or 5% of it that comes from wind and solar. Very few solar farms. Some wind that we have out east in Gaspésie in Quebec. And then there's I think we have like a couple of nuclear reactors, so that's fairly clean. And I think something like 1% that is gas powered in Quebec, or 0.2%, something ridiculously small. But anyway, because of the way it's structured, Hydro-Quebec has pretty much a monopoly. So you cannot shop around for a different electricity provider. But the good news is Quebec has some of the lowest rates for electricity in North America, and probably some of the lowest ones in the world as well. So it's very cheap to use electricity here, okay? Especially if your heating and water and hot water is already provided, including your rent. The amount of electricity, especially in an apartment, that you're going to be using just to keep the lights on is going to be like maybe $20 or $30 per month, something like that. Most people have the bill only come to them every 2 months, but you can set it up so that it's equal payments every single month if you prefer it that way. But most people, again, Hydro-Quebec typically just sends you a bill based on your usage every 2 months, okay? Unless you specifically ask for it to come every month. Anyway, again, insurance. If you have a car, obviously that's additional cost there as well. If you're a tenant, it's still typically recommended to get tenant insurance. It's a lot less expensive to get tenants insurance, essentially insuring your belongings, than it is to if you're actually owning a place, obviously. But it's still might be still $20-$30 a month, maybe $50 a month, again, depending on how expensive your things are and how much insurance coverage you want to get. Utilities are typically more or less the same. Some places in Montreal, most places, because again, electricity is so cheap, most places will typically use electricity also for stoves, but some places still have gas. Now, gas providers, there are two. Gas Metropolitain is the main one in Montreal. There are some small sections that will have some smaller independent ones, but that's highly unlikely you'll have that. So some places you might have also a gas bill, as for cooking, essentially, like natural gas, essentially. But that's less likely. And here are rough estimates of what that would cost. Again, honestly, the utilities, it gives you an estimate of 325. That includes everyone. Okay, that includes everyone. That includes people that own houses and need to heat their houses using electric furnaces and things like that. And you're using forced air essentially. So yeah, there's no way, if you're living in an apartment and it's an apartment complex, there's no way, if your heating and hot water are included in your rent, there's no way that your utilities are going to be anywhere near $300 per month. There's literally no way that's gonna happen. Again, these are just examples, including everyone. If you have a large house, especially during winter months, you have to pay for the electricity, you have to pay for the heating and all that stuff. And then yes, it'll be $700-800 one month, and then you average that out over the summer months when it's a bit less, and then you end up with that $300. That's realistic, okay? But so yeah, so that's one little caveat that I need to mention here. Okay, that's how it goes. Notice here, telecommunications, so cable, I don't know how many people still get cable, but I guess subscription services are more or less the same thing there. Again, internet, telephone, again, not I personally, I do not know a single person that still has a landline, but maybe, maybe, I don't know. Some people still do. But yeah, they're saying $275. Okay. If you shop around, and I'll show you a website that you can use to shop around for cell phone plans and whatnot. I have 2 kids and a wife. So our cell phone plans for all 4 of us, unlimited minutes, plenty of data. It costs us, with tax and everything, costs us about $99 and change. Okay. That's for 4 cell phone lines. Okay. Our internet, including one subscription service, which, because it's a bundle, so that's why I got it. Otherwise, I would not have bothered. With tax and everything, cost me $80.27, I think, with tax and everything. Okay, so $80 plus so that comes down to roughly $180. Okay, in our case. But keep in mind, that's for 4 cell phone plans. Okay, I don't think you will have 4 cell phone plans just for yourself. Okay, so my point is, this number here relies more on the older, ridiculously expensive telecom, and that's why I was telling you that telecom can actually be quite expensive. Okay, especially if you have a situation where you have roommates. So at that point, obviously, your rent might be, let's say you have 2 roommates, and then your average rent is $1,500, so you're paying $500, let's say, right? At that point. Again, in this particular example, or they're giving you ranges between 1,700 and 1,300. That would be a 1,500 based on what they're showing us here. And then obviously you might split the subscription services and the home internet, but your cell phone that you're fully responsible for. So not that long ago, I would say the last 2-3 years, plenty of plans. The cheapest plan you could get is like $80 for some of the providers, for plus tax. Keep in mind, the tax always gets on top of that. So that's another 14.975 on top of whatever you're paying. Whereas these days, as I said, you can find plenty of plans that have sufficient amounts of data, 15 to 20 gigs per month. In my opinion, should be plenty of data. Since you have free Wi-Fi on campus, you probably will have some form of internet at home. And the rest of the time, 20 gigs of data, for the few, whatever, 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour that it takes you to go from wherever you live to on campus, that should be plenty of time the 20 gigs should be, for most people, plenty to use on public transit. And then obviously, if you're driving, you probably should not be using your data other than maybe for just Google Maps or Waze or whatever. Anyway, childcare, I will tell you, those of you that have children, this is an underestimate. Although, well, yes and no. It depends on your, I guess, no, sorry. Let me retract that. As a student, because your income is low, this is probably an overestimate, because Quebec has really affordable daycare if you're low income. You're going to get a lot of government refunds, essentially. So your upfront costs will be maybe $1,000, $1,000 and change per month in some cases, depending on the daycare. You might still find some around $600-700, but then once you factor in per month, once you factor in the tax credits, and sometimes you can actually apply so that the tax credits are given to you at the beginning of the month. That way you don't have to pay $1,500 out of pocket and then get a $900 tax rebate, or $800 or $1,000 tax rebate. So yeah, so some daycares will be around $700, but I've seen more and more that are closer to $1,000, again, depending on location and so on and so forth. But again, that might apply only to some of you. But yeah, so these tend to be fairly fixed. Other expenses can be quite variable. Now, with careful planning, you can try to make them fixed. Okay. Again, groceries, in an ideal world, you could try to make them fixed by making sure not to overspend or spend more than X on different categories. And I'll show you a different, I have like 4 different slides a bit later showing you different tips and tricks on how to save on groceries. Okay. I will be talking about different websites that you can use. We'll be talking about different programs that you can use to essentially save quite a bit on groceries. But again, because of the recent increase in inflation and because of the entire tariff mess that I explained at the beginning, and because of, again, Canada's temperature fluctuations, prices will go up substantially in the winter months. So in a way, yes, you can make it sort of fixed. You have like fixed monthly costs during the summer, you average a certain amount, and then fixed higher monthly costs for a few months in the winter. Right. So in that regard, they become fixed for a few months at a time, but then they switch, up and down. It's just the reality of living in Montreal, living in Canada, unfortunately. Again, eating out. So again, this is what the average person spends. Again, this is not what the average student spends, mind you, right? This is what the average person spends, okay, in Canada. So I'd recommend, cutting that down a little bit for the eating out, at least at the beginning. Unless, again, you're one of the fortunate ones that manage to get multiple scholarships and you're allowed to stack them. Some scholarships are stackable, some are not. And speaking of taxes, you also have to pay income taxes in Canada, higher than in some areas and a little bit lower than other jurisdictions. But Canada is a fairly highly taxed jurisdiction. Now, the good news is most Canadian scholarships and fellowships are tax-free for undergrad, master's, and PhD students. Postdocs, there's some reductions in taxes, but it's partly taxed in most cases. There are some exceptions, again, depending on the program, and that's beyond today's session. I give sessions for postdocs, so that's a different story for a different time. So the reason I'm telling you this is because if you manage to get a scholarship, and sometimes some small scholarships are definitely worthwhile, and there are certain more unconventional or less known of scholarships that people are like, oh, it's just $5,000, I'm not going to bother. Oh, it's just $2,000, I'm not going to bother. Apply to everything that you're able to apply, because your department, sometimes GPS, graduate and postdoctoral studies office, will have a whole bunch of scholarships listed that you don't get automatically selected for, that you personally have to apply for. Most students will typically apply for the large ones that you will see. That there will be plenty of emails that will be sent in July and September, and July through September, about different info sessions that will take place late August to early September, because the deadlines are typically sometime in October. For the federal government ones, so the Tri-Council scholarships, so those are for CIHR, NSERC, and SSHRC. As well as for the big provincial ones from the FQRNT, FRSQ, and FQRNT. So again, because those are 20,000, 30,000, 35,000, 50,000 for some of them scholarships, right? So a lot of people will focus on those, and definitely focus on those and make sure to apply for them if you're eligible, right? But people ignore the fact that scholarships, whether they're big or small, as long as they're from Canadian sources, like 99% of them are 100% tax-free. That means if you're getting $5,000, 0% of that goes in taxes, okay? So you keep every penny of those $5,000. So that can make actually a substantial difference. Whereas if you're working for a living, you have to pay taxes on that amount, okay? And I have 2 sessions on income taxes. Those of you that want to know how to file taxes, look for the session on income taxes in the spring semester. There's always 2 sessions offered. All right. So, then household expenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this just gives you an idea. And keep in mind, again, this is not what the average student spends, but what the average Canadian spends, okay? So what I want you to do is fill these in from memory without actually looking at, without looking at your actual budget if you've already been here. Otherwise, it's going to be guesswork in terms of how much you think it's going to cost you. And then what I want you to do is track your actual expenses for at least a month, ideally for 3 months, because sometimes your regular expenses, maybe you're buying a gift for a friend of yours, or maybe it's a time like it's the sort of gift giving season. It's like Christmas or Hanukkah or Ramadan or whatever religious reason you might have to be giving gifts to people, and as a result, right, your expenses might be substantially higher in that particular month, right? So that's why it's typically recommended to, I would say, look at an average of 3 months, but I want you to start with at least 1 month, because for most people, if you've never budgeted before, tracking your expenses for 3 months might seem like very daunting. And especially, life happens. There's like an exam that you have to prep for, and there's like some lab work that you have to do, and there's some other things that happen and so on and so forth. Maybe you have to grade some papers last minute, and you kind of forget about budgeting properly, right? That particular month. So track your expenses for at least a month, and then compare your actual expenses to the ones that you thought you're going to have. I guarantee you there will be at least one of these categories where you will substantially overspend, and there will hopefully be at least one of these categories where you will be substantially underspending. Obviously, the one where you're underspending, good job. The one where you're overspending, try to adjust your other categories to make it fit if it's impossible to cut it. And if you're able to, and if not, try to find ways to cut it. Okay? All right, so that's available in English, obviously, the one that I showed you. And because this is the Government of Canada, the exact same booklet is also available in French. So here you go. So those of you that are coming from countries where French is the first language, there you go. That might be useful. Just see. Okay. Excellent. So far, so good, everyone? Okay. So how to stay on track? Because I talked about tracking your expenses. Well, again, step number one, right? Because there's no way for you to know whether you're doing well or you're not doing well if you're not paying attention to where your money goes. Now, one of the benefits of most people, that's the other thing, by the way. In Canada, credit cards are very big, okay? Meaning that as soon as you're on campus, again, depending on the year, but let's just say that McGill has allowed a number of banks that are sort of partnered with McGill to advertise to students in different departments at different points in time. Oh, look, we're offering student checking accounts for free, like no monthly cost essentially. Oh, and here's a basic credit card for with a $500 limit or a $1,000 limit, which is fine. Just if you've never used credit cards before, just be careful. I'm very pro using credit cards correctly. I'm very much against using credit cards irresponsibly, damaging your credit score, messing up your finances. Okay, so credit cards are a double-edged sword. The same way that a knife can be very handy in the kitchen and allows you to make delicious meals, if you are not using it properly, you can cut yourself and injure yourself badly. Okay, so the same applies to credit cards. Okay, they can be incredibly useful. Many credit cards will have some incredible perks. I have a video I'll mention to you when that shows you a Government of Canada website that allows you to compare different credit cards and their features. That way you can basically find the best credit card for you. If you're a student, especially for the few months where you're in Canada, it'll be a bit trickier to get a credit card if you're not able to secure some of the ones from McGill. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm definitely pro the ones that will be offered to you that are kind of, all students are sort of pre-approved. Definitely get one of those to build your credit. But I would say after about half a year, three months to 6 months of being in Canada, especially if you're making your payments on time for your cell phone bills, your other regular bills, make sure you're not missing payments. Then do try to apply for at least one other credit card that actually gives you some nicer perks. Because a lot of the very basic entry-level credit cards that you're pre-approved for as a student at McGill, again, they're very good to help you build your credit. I have a slide on the very end talking about that. But very few of them have the best perks, right? Most of them will just be a basic credit card, right? 25% interest, and that's kind of all it is. It just helps you build your credit. Some of the better credit cards will give you 1, 2, even more percent cashback rewards, will give you extended free warranty, will give you all sorts of travel perks for those of you that are traveling internationally for conferences or for visiting family or what have you, right? So anyway, so all this little addendum to say the downside of credit cards is that if you're not using them properly, especially if you're just paying with your smartwatch or if you're paying with your cell phone, it's very easy to just kind of tap and sort of forget how much money you've just spent, right? The pain of paying, which is a psychological event or a psychological term, when people are actually spending money, you can actually see people, if you're actually spending, old-fashioned real money, plastic bills, because they're no longer made of paper these days, but plastic bills, people actually do experience some sort of subconscious level of anguish when they're parting with their money. I personally have a $20 bill, emergency bill in my wallet. I think the last time I was at an ATM and took money out was probably about a year and a half ago. I'm just keeping that $20 if I ever need it. And for whatever reason, the internet is down and I need to pay for something. I need to, fuel up my car for, at least $20 because, it's on empty and and the network is down, right? That's why I have that. I never ever spend money other than on a credit card because I use it very diligently. I take advantage of all the perks, right? Um, and I'm also very conscious about how much money I'm spending. I do not spend money that I'm not able to pay off in full by the due date. However, if you've never used a credit card before, or it's not that common in your neck of the woods, as it were, uh, there is a danger that you're going to go into too much debt and over indebt yourself. So just be very, very careful. As I said, it's a double-edged sword. Now, the good news is because you're using a credit card most likely more often, and if you're not using credit card, you're probably going to be using a debit card. It's a lot easier than ever before to track how much money you've spent on what categories. Now, obviously, if you're going to a large store, like if you're going to Walmart or if you're going to any large store like Loblaws or what have you, while again those stores will have primarily a certain type of items. Or you're going to Canadian Tire, you're probably buying stuff for your car or for the house, right? You're buying cooking ware, or you're buying maybe some tools or something like that, right? They're not going to be selling food at Canadian Tire other than like some random snacks. If you're going to Loblaws, you're probably going to buy, or Maxi or Metro, those are grocery stores, right? But some of them will also carry some clothing, right? So that's why it's a good idea to not just look at how much money have I spent at those particular stores, but try to break down, the $50 bill, the $100 bill, the $200 bill. How much of that was how much of those $200 that I went to Walmart for, how much was that spent on furniture versus groceries versus toiletries versus food, right? Those are different categories. Just so you are aware, if you're overspending, it's not just, oh, I'm spending too much money at Walmart. It's like, okay, but on what items are you overspending? And is it only that 1 month, or is it sort of a habit that you have, right? So again, track your expenses, and then again, figure out what you can spend less on, and negotiate down when possible. Now you might be thinking, what on earth does this little ad from, this is a legitimate ad that was from either 1950s or 1960s. I don't remember off the top of my head in what decade it came from, but it's essentially about 70, 80 years old as an ad. And believe it or not, this was one of the most successful Marlboro cigarette ads of that decade. Obviously, these days you're not even allowed to advertise cigarettes in Canada anymore. And just the way it's set up, you would never use a child in this way to advertise things like tobacco or gambling or what do you call it? Or drinks, or alcoholic drinks or things like that. But again, the 1950s, 1960s, they were a different era, a different time. And this apparently it was a very successful ad campaign targeted at women specifically. Okay, and it was one of the most successful ad campaigns that they had in that decade. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out here is because these days, you're not just, advertisers don't just put an ad in a paper or in a flyer or on TV and hoping that the right person looks at it. Through the use of social media, and again, depending on who you are, some of you use social media a lot more than others, right? It's the easiest that it's ever been for companies to target you when you're at your most suggestible and most vulnerable, right? Especially those of you that go to bed late, pulling an all-nighter, studying for an exam while listening to some music, and then you're getting some ads in between. The algorithm knows exactly who you are in terms of what is your profile, what you're interested in, and will show you ads that are much more likely to trigger a click than those old-fashioned ads. So again, it's very important to be aware of these things. And as I said, you're probably aware of this already, but it's worthwhile mentioning or repeating. Now, this little website here, Camel Camel Camel, is probably one of my favorite websites to save a little bit of money when you're shopping. Okay. What this website does, is that it allows you to track. It allows you to track prices on Amazon. Okay. So essentially, actually, let's test. Can someone just give me an item you would buy on Amazon, or you would want to look at a price on Amazon for, real quick?
How about a backpack?
Not sure if the Q&A is, or maybe people are a bit too intimidated because I'm talking too much. I'm talking too fast. Anyone? Any items
How about a backpack, Alex?
that you
Miss
want me to
Maya.
look at? Okay. All right. So if you're not giving me one, I'll pick something that I know for a fact that it has a decent amount of data for. So let's say Axe deodorant. Okay. Okay. So let's look at. Sorry. Oops. I think I double click on this one. Okay. So right now we can see that it's 23% off, $4.98, plus you get an extra 5% off if you buy 5 of them. Right. So that seems like a good deal. Now, again, some people hate Amazon, and that's fine. The important thing to be aware of is that a lot of the sales that you see, they're not Amazon specific. They're a lot of times manufacturer specific. So when a manufacturer specific sale is happening, that same sale or a similar sale is available anywhere that item is sold. So all you have to do here is you essentially copy the link to that item in here. Okay. And it'll show you exactly what that price was. Okay. And notice that here was claiming that, regular price 647. Are they lying? No, they're not lying. You see, it was 647. But notice that it actually also dipped a bit below 498, right? So this is not the absolute cheapest it's been. And this little cycle where it kind of goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And notice sometimes it goes up and down over much shorter time periods. But typically, most of these companies will have, I would say, 6 to 12 week sales cycle, where basically every 6 to 12 weeks, some of the items that they have will go on sale or will be posted on sale. So you can essentially use this website in combination with the Amazon postings to figure out whether that item is on sale or not. And then if you don't want to buy it on Amazon because you found a better price elsewhere, you don't want to buy it out of principle on Amazon, that's fine. You can go elsewhere and it'll most likely also be on sale at the same time. Okay. Sometimes, again, Amazon has Amazon specific sales, but most of the time, it's this sales cycle that follows. Okay. You can also negotiate prices down for certain items. Again, depending on what part of the world you're coming from, some places, if you're going to the local market, the price that you see at the local market, that's not the final price. That's just the suggested price, right? And then you haggle for everything that you're buying. In other places, there's no real haggling happening. So again, depends on where you're from. Now, in most stores, again, if you're just buying groceries, the negotiation you can do in Canada is you have to show them using an app, and I'll show you. There's a bunch of different apps that you can use for this. Most large retailers will price match but it has to be the exact same product, the exact same brand, the exact same format, so the exact same size of item, available for less elsewhere. So you can only negotiate the price if you can tell them your competitor is selling the exact same thing for less. So match the price or I'm not buying it, essentially, was indirectly what you're telling them. So then they will be willing to lower the price. Again, this is not because the person behind the cashier is an evil or mean or anything like this. They're not allowed to lower, to individually negotiate the price with every person. But if you can show them using an app, using a coupon, that same item is available for less elsewhere and that deal is still currently available and on that day, then they will price match you. And again, 90+% of the time in large stores, they will match that. Okay, so that's the way you can negotiate for groceries, essentially. The way you can negotiate for larger items, those for example, something like this, I would recommend. There's different companies. This is just one of them. So Tanguay L'Entrepôt, whenever you see L'Entrepôt, that's basically a larger store where a lot of times these guys are essentially partnered with a different company called Breu et Martineau, which is a local manufacturer or a local chain of stores that essentially sell furniture and appliances. And what happens is whenever they've almost sold out that particular item, or whenever it's they receive the new season or the new version of that couch or what have you, and they only have a handful left, they will discount them in their own stores. But if they're not able to sell them yet, they will a lot of times they will send them off to companies like, or to their partners, which is this Tanguay L'Entrepôt, where essentially if you're okay buying last year's couch model or the couch model from 2 years, again, they're still brand new items. Don't get me wrong, they're not used, they're not damaged typically. And so as a result, they'll send them over here, and you're going to get substantial discounts. Okay, typically. Again, there's only a handful of these, but there's other ones as well. This is just one example. Okay, so you can save substantially by doing that. Then obviously another option would be to buy either there or at the local store to buy the floor model, right? So if they're almost, let's say that's the last TV that they have, or if that's the last couch that they have, the floor model was literally on the floor, so it'll be gently used, right? Obviously, it's a couch. Some people will have been seeing on. Maybe some of them might have a small ding or a small scratch if it was let's say a fridge or something like that. You still get the regular warranty on it. It's just you might have to put up with a small scratch or something like that, and it's treated as an open box item in good condition, typically, right? So obviously, if it's not working, then they're gonna refund you. But my point is, you could save a few $100s just by buying the floor model if you're okay with those added complications, if you will, or added things. So there's just something to keep in mind. And then also when you're at those locations, you can then also try to negotiate the price lower, not by telling them, oh, look, your competitor has it for cheaper, but saying, oh, look, I'm buying it, I'm buying the floor model, or I'm buying this. Can you lower the price a bit more? Or I'm a bit on a budget. And sometimes, because again, those items are a bit more expensive, they're a few $100s, they will be more willing to negotiate with you, right? But again, if you're just buying milk, you cannot just go to Maxi, like any grocery store, and be like, oh, well, you listed it for $4.95. I want to pay $3 for it, unless you have the same milk, in the form of a coupon that their competitor at Metro, for example, sells it for $3. Then they'll say, okay, we'll match it. Okay, just something to keep in mind. And now, obviously, to stay on track, the optimal thing to do is try to increase your income over time. Whether that means that you might be TAing maybe the second semester you're here, or maybe you're trying to apply for additional scholarships, or maybe if your program allows you and your time allows you and your mental capacity allows you to maybe work a bit of part-time doing something or another, freelancing or whatever, if you increase your income over time. And obviously the end goal there is to graduate, and then hopefully once you graduate, your income will be substantially higher than when you were a student, right? That's the goal at the end anyway. And then as you're moving up, whether you're getting a few extra dollars by TAing, or whichever it is that you're able to increase, whichever way it is that you're able to increase your income a little bit, the thing to keep in mind is, again, to avoid needless upgrades and wasteful spending if it's not absolutely necessary. These links here. So here there's two different, I think 30 to 50-minute long documentaries on YouTube talking about sort of people's need to upgrade to the latest tech, whether that's the latest phone every year or latest laptop every couple of years or something like that, and what happens to all the old items that essentially get thrown in landfills a lot of times. And here, similar documentaries talking about, to what extent it's really bad for the environment and sort of socially, globally, for websites that are kind of fast fashion websites, like if you're looking at Shein, if you're looking at Temu and so on and so forth, where a lot of people are buying various types of clothing that they either never wear or wear once, and then they end up throwing away because they're very poorly made. They might be very inexpensive, but it's actually a lot better to just spend $30 or $40 on an item and then be able to wear it for 2 years instead of spending $5 on it, wear it once and then throwing it out in the garbage, right? In terms of how much it costs you per time that you wore it, plus how much pollution that entails, it's a lot worse long term, right? And then again, invest for the long term. So once you figure those things out, you have money left over, then it's about what is the right investment for you. And again, that's beyond today's scope, but the goal is, I'm budgeting, now I have extra money, what do I do with that money, right? And here's again, so that's sort of the main, those are the main points. Here, this is just a sample budget. Obviously, depending on what field you're in, your tuition will be very, very different. This year, actually, this is sort of my main presentation slide over here. So in province, tuition is around $5,000-$6,000, again, depending on what field you're in. Obviously, if you're an international student, that will be substantially more. So yeah, I'm just gonna show you let's say you're doing a full-time PhD for next year. You see, it's basically 3,321 for the fall semester and then 2,400 for the winter semester. Added them up together, it's about 2,500, right? Now, if you're switching that to international student, again, same program, that all of a sudden jumps to $22,000. You see? So that's why I was saying, like, if you're able to get that differential fee waiver, that saves you about $15,000 to $17,000 depending on the program. Okay. And again, this is a very useful subsection of the McGill website in case you don't know your tuition fees yet. Have a look at it. It's very useful. All right. So in order to be on top of things, your goal, your goal, if you want to be like the average Canadian, right? The average Canadian doesn't save quite as much as the experts recommend. Experts recommend, in an ideal situation, right, to save at least 10% of your income. Now, as a student, that's not the most realistic thing because, again, most students don't earn all that much, right? The average Canadian saves around 5% and change, okay? So the average Canadian saves only half as much as what the experts recommend. And if you really want to grow your wealth, you should really, especially when you're earning more, you should really be aiming at the 20% plus. But again, that's for future you. That's not for current you as a student. If even 5% is too much, then any amount that you can just reduce from, if you're overspending, essentially, the first goal really should be, okay, I want to make sure that I have a balanced budget, that I'm not spending more money than I'm earning. And then if all you can do is save $1 per month, psychologically, that will actually be very beneficial to you because you're telling yourself, okay, I managed to spend less than I actually earned and I actually put a little bit aside. Again, $1 a month is not a huge amount. Obviously, it's not going to make you a millionaire anytime soon, but at least it's better, again, mentally being able to follow a budget and being able to say, okay, I'm actually cash flow positive. I'm actually making money per month. I mean, I'm keeping something, right? Now, the way this works here is basically, in this hypothetical example, this person is earning $25,000 per year. They're spending $5,000 in school fees. So that means they have about $1,667.67 in money left over, okay? And their goal is to eventually get to $104.70 because that represents 5%. And in this particular instance, they've just managed to save $77.67. That's fine. Again, any amount that works, that's okay. But essentially, as you're tracking your expenses, you see exactly how much you spent that month, and then try to make adjustments for month number 2, right? And then to make sure that you actually save, instead of waiting until the very end to set aside in savings whatever is left over, it's a good idea to start from the get-go. Tell yourself that it's almost a bill that you're paying to yourself. So every two weeks, most people get their stipend paid out to them every 2 weeks. If you're getting a scholarship, again, some scholarships are managed by the university, by your supervisor, so you're going to get them equal payments as stipends, but that are non-taxable. If you're getting a regular stipend, depending on the source of the money and from the grant of your supervisor, some of the regular supervisor grants are also non-taxable, some of them, but most of them are taxable. So it really depends on how it's structured, depends on your program, it depends on what your research interest is, depends on where the money for your supervisor is coming, what type of grant it's coming from, because some grants for the supervisor are tax-free, tax-exempt if it's used for paying the stipends for students working on a specific research project. There's a whole bunch of ifs and, so it can become a bit confusing. But my point is, if you're getting a scholarship or a fellowship, most of those are tax-free. Sometimes they're paid out to the university and then they're paid out to you in equal, bi-weekly payments every 2 weeks, right? Other times, however, again, depending on the scholarship, other times they're paid directly into your bank account, but only once every, I would say, 4 to 6 months, depending on which one. So some pay them out twice a year, and some scholarships get paid out basically 3 times a year. Some a bit more or less, but those are some examples of some of the big scholarships. So then, if you get those large chunks of money paid out to you, you have to budget very carefully to make sure that you're not spending that $10,000 that you got once, twice a year or 3 times a year. You get three times $10,000 payments. Essentially, you have to make sure to keep that money properly. So at that point, you probably want to place it in a high interest savings account, paying you 1 or 2% or something like that, which is not a lot, but makes the money available instantly, and there's zero risk involved. You definitely don't want to be taking essentially the money for the next 3 months worth of living expenses that you're getting from that scholarship, if that's the only source of income, and then be like, oh, I'm just going to buy this high risk penny stock or, some random crypto because it's going to go 10x in the next 3 weeks. No, that's gambling. That's crazy if you're doing that with that large amount. All right. Not recommended. So as I said before, recommended 30-35% on shelter. And in this person's case, that would represent roughly between $625 and $729. And essentially that would be if they're spending $30 on electricity and, nothing on natural gas, and then $670 rent, that would be roughly $700 per month in this scenario. Again, depends on what your situation is. Again, look at your situation. Also, very useful little websites here, or sections of the website here. So these are the terms and conditions that a landlord is actually allowed to include in a lease. Okay. So I highly encourage you to have a look through at this link here, learn about leases and what a landlord is actually allowed to include in a lease. And also what are your rights and obligations pertaining to the premises. Okay. For example, are you allowed to sublet an apartment? What happens in joint tenancy cases? What happens if you need to move before the lease ends? What happens upon the renewal of the lease? Can your landlord just randomly hike the lease by any amount? So the short answer to that is, if the building that you're renting, building or individual house that you're renting, or a building, the apartment in the building or condo that you're renting out, if that the place you're renting is located in a building or in a house that is less than 5 years old, then essentially there's no real protection. The rent can increase by any amount, really, because in the first 5 years, especially when it comes to condos, a lot of times the condo fees are not fully set in stone, so they can increase exponentially for the landlord as well. And then they can argue that, okay, we're going to increase your lease by a lot. As long as the building or house was built more than 5 years ago, however, the landlord cannot raise the lease by more than what the Régie du Logement, which is the provincial government body that sets lease prices. They're not allowed to raise it by even a fraction of a percentage point more than what the maximum is there. You can always try to negotiate it down as well, of course. That's one place where being nice but firm helps. And I honestly, these days with LLMs, you can definitely ask them, can you write me a letter or an email that I can try, polite one but firm one, to try to negotiate down my lease price upon renewal, or try to, if they're trying to hike it, and so on and so forth. But again, it's important to be aware of what your rights are. So, be aware of exactly about how much you're allowed to increase the leases and what have you. And yeah, I would highly encourage you to have a look at these websites. So this website, and then your rights and obligations in terms of, are you allowed to have pets? Are you allowed to have any pets? What happens if, let's say, your landlord is not fixing a broken window or a broken water pipe or a broken appliance, and so on and so forth. All of those things are listed here. When do you have to pay your rent by, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? When does your landlord have to give you your RL31 tax slip so you're eligible for the solidarity tax credit? You get a bit of a tax refund essentially for paying rent, and so on and so forth. Okay, so have a look. Very useful little subsection on the website here as well from Revenu Quebec as well. And there you go. So this is that website I mentioned to you before that allows you to compare and contrast different cell phone plans as well as home internet plans. There you go. So just to show you very quickly, so you can obviously select internet here, but let's just look at mobile providers right now. So we're gonna compare mobile. So cell phone plan, and obviously pick the correct province. So there, and let's say you don't have a provider, because otherwise it'll try to, and there we go. And then obviously select what you want. Let's say if you still use the call for regular and so on and so forth. Right, so let's say Canada wide, and then again select what how many gigs you want. Typically, if you already have a cell phone, you will get some rebates might be $5 a month of a rebate, or even $10 less a month, depending on the plan you pick if you bring your own device versus purchasing a device with the plan. And typically gives you a bit more flexibility, but obviously pick and choose your preferred ones. And then it'll basically show you a whole bunch of different plans and their respective prices, okay? And exactly how much data. Now, some providers will have, so you can see here, they'll also give you different referral bonuses. You can use people's referral bonuses. Most of these referral bonuses will work, I would say 95% of the time they'll work off the bat. Sometimes though, because there are certain limits in terms of how many times they can be used, sometimes they will fail. And some students have told me that they've tried to use the referral bonuses or codes that they found on this website, and then they it didn't end up working for them. And again, a lot of times students ask me which one I use. Again, I'm personally I'm very much a believer of, if I don't need a service to be over the top and I can get something cheaper, I rather invest the $50 difference and have my money grow exponentially over time than be lazy and not not do that. So personally, I use Fizz. Again, that works for me. I don't use a lot of data. The other fun thing with Fizz is essentially any of their plans, any of the data that you're not using gets transferred over for the next month for 2 months in a row, right? So let's say month number, you're getting a 20 gig plan. So month number 1, you're only using 5. So month number 2, you're going to have 20 gigs from month number 2 plus 15 gigs that you didn't use in month number 1. Let's say now you're using 10 gigs in month number 2. In month number 3, you're going to get the 20 gigs from month number 3 plus the 15 gigs that you haven't used yet from month number 1 plus the 10 gigs you haven't used yet from month number 2. So you see, like it just bloats more and more and more. So even getting a relatively low amount of data with Fizz actually ends up giving you a lot more data overall. So I have something like 90 gigs, I think, per month at this point, because I don't use a lot of it, despite the fact that my plan is a 25 gig plan, right? Whereas most of the other ones don't have that type of rollover. Some do, but again, click on each one of them, to view the offer, read the terms and conditions, and try to find one of those codes. I've also included my referral codes in the what do you call it? In one of the slides a bit later on, if in case out of all of the ones that you want to check out, you think Fizz is the best one, and for whatever reason the Fizz code doesn't work again. But if one of your roommates or something has also used Fizz, please use their code instead. Okay, but I've included mine just in case you guys want to use them. So transportation. So the exact same thing can be done with the internet provider. One of the better ones that I would recommend is eBox, and same thing. I've included a referral code. That one's not mine, but I've included it anyway. I personally am using Bell, and the only reason I'm using Bell is because I got a ridiculously low price 2 years ago when they first installed fiber in my area. You cannot get my package anymore. If I didn't have this package, I would definitely use eBox as well. The reason I like eBox is because their price is a fraction of Bell's, yet they're using the exact same line. So essentially you're getting almost the same speeds as Bell, but at like half the cost. So that's why. There are other cheap ones as well. Again, that same website, compare and contrast internet providers, figure out which one you like best. But I would recommend eBox for like one of the cheap ones. But that has really good service. Some of the cheap ones sometimes don't have great service, but yeah, the eBox one, very, very reliable. All right. So then obviously public transit, here's the Opus card tariffs. So you can have a look at that. That shows you exactly how much your card costs you. It has an option here that you can pay for 4 months. So you save a little bit if you buy the card every 4 months. 4 months when you know for sure you're going to be using it every single day, you will save a little bit if you're buying that one. Okay, so that would be one option for a student to use. Again, just double check based on how much you're using it. Sometimes it might be worthwhile just to pay on as you go. If you almost never, if you're close enough that during the summer you're able to bike to McGill or just walk to McGill, no point in buying the monthly pass. If on the other hand you're using every day, that's a different story, right? Useful little website here, gasbuddy.com, that you can use to compare your gas prices. Again, Waze has some of those features as well. Google Maps has some of those features as well. Just this one actually has a bit more data overall. So I would recommend using this. Their app is a bit finicky, honestly, and there's some issues in terms of how they're actually sharing the I think there you go. How they're sharing some of the data. So I personally don't use the app on my phone because I'm a bit uncomfortable in terms of how, the data privacy information, how they're storing data, how they're handling data privacy, and how they're storing their information. But in terms of, especially if you're doing road trips, very, very useful little website to find slightly cheaper gas on the way. Again, food I already mentioned, gadgets, same thing. So here's that Access Montreal card. Okay. And I already told you at the beginning, earlier on, you can essentially use it to, there you go, to save a lot of money at any of their partners. And they have over 70 different partners. And here's the full list of partners on the Island Montreal. And you can see, for day camps, if you have kids, how much you're able to save, like $20 just for a week. And the card itself costs you $8 for the whole year, right? If you're into football, you have discounts and so on and so forth. Many, many, many different events and areas around town that you get massive discounts that, again, stack on top of your student discount. So it's very, very good. And again, cashback rewards cards will also provide you, if you get a 2% cashback or 1% cashback, you can actually save quite a bit of money per month using those. Okay, so now for budgeting, again, a lot of you might have thought, oh, I'm going to show you step by step how to budget. The reason I chose to, instead of, again, this is a video I did like 3 years ago or thereabouts, I think. This uses this freely available spreadsheet from the Government of Canada, okay? And it walks you step by step how to fill it out. So the reason I didn't show you this is because the video already exists and you can pause it, rewind, look at it. And again, some of you already know how to do this, so I didn't want to waste your time essentially for those of you that are already very familiar and comfortable budgeting. But those of you that literally want a step-by-step guide how to budget, there's this little video here. Okay, so enjoy. Okay. The main point of the session was more to show you kind of the logic or the theory behind the budgeting and show you some of the tools. Okay. The same thing, you can compare and contrast some of these different banking accounts that I mentioned to you before. That, again, that's also a Government of Canada tool. Okay. And again, these slides will be shared with you by my colleague in the next couple of days. And the second video that I made here literally shows you how to use that second tool. And then this is just an example of some of the deals out there for some of the better debit cards and debit accounts, essentially. Okay, so essentially this video matches that, this matches that, this matches that. Okay. So the differential fee waiver. So some countries offer this substantial discount, and you can go to, essentially you're paying the Quebec price instead of paying the international student price of those who are international students. Go to this subsection of the McGill website, and essentially you see these are the savings for the 2025-2026 year. It'll be very similar for the 2026-2027 year. You can read through this, look at exactly what the eligibility is. Again, I apologize. I went a bit long with some of my examples, so we're a couple of minutes behind schedule. So otherwise, I would have spent maybe 2-3 minutes kind of showing you the examples here. But again, just read that section of the McGill website. Go through these subsections here. This shows you exactly how many of those. This section here shows you exactly how many of those differential fee waivers are eligible, are offered for masters, for doctoral students, for undergrads. Again, I don't think any of you are undergrads for this day session, so just graduate students. And I'll show you specifically which countries have agreements with Quebec. Okay, so have a look at that to figure out whether you're eligible for it or not. And then have a look at scholarships and student aid, the scholarships and student aid office, as well as GPS to figure out what are some additional scholarships or that you can actually find. And they also offer budget and debt management appointments. So you can contact them either at student.aid@mcgill.ca or give them a call to make an appointment with them. Or as I said, you can send me an email and we can chat. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but I can definitely, if you have some questions you're trying to create your own custom budget, I can definitely help you out with that. So you can either contact me for free in the month of June. I'll be busy in July and August, but in the month of June, you can definitely do that, or contact them over there. Okay. And in last, just wrapping up here, because we have, I think, about a minute or two left. So when it comes to grocery, again, it's important to distinguish between what is a need, you actually need, versus a want. Oh, this is a slightly higher quality brand, but I'm very limited on my budget. Maybe go with the one that meets the need instead of going for the fancier option. And then, when you have the money available, go for the fancy one. So when it comes to grocery shopping, you can obviously buying in bulk. A lot of this stuff is very obvious. Try to buy the generic brand. So I'm going to leave that to you here. One app that I would highly encourage you to look at is this little, price tracking websites like the Camel one, but this Flip app, very, very useful little app that essentially manages or monitors all the currently available coupons. And allows you to essentially, you're just scanning the item, and then when you're going to checkout, you're able to just show the cashier. It's like, look, this same item with the same barcode is available for less at your competitor, and that way you essentially get these substantial discounts. Okay, so I would highly encourage you to download the Flip app. And that I already talked about the 6 to 12 cycle. Again, consider buying used items on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or Kijiji. Used items, those websites are fine. When it comes to renting places, I did rent a place off of Craigslist. That wasn't a scam. I'm just saying they're rare, but the ones that do exist as scams are more likely to be on those websites than Realtor.ca or Rentseeker that I showed you before. Okay, just something to be aware of. And just again, if you guys can stick around maybe for like 1 more minute, I'm just gonna wrap up right now. I just have like 3 more slides to go through here real quick. So there are various different programs that you can use. So for example, again, I always recommend students create a separate email account that doesn't have their real name, but you're still monitoring it, right? So this is, I refer to this as the junk email account. The reason for that is you do not want to be using the same email for your, banking and for your McGill emails to your professor as you're using for signing up for various, sign up for our newsletter and sign up for this and that. And the reason for that is there's more and more scammers out there using AI to craft very realistic sounding emails that seem to be coming from the government, seem to be coming from various sources. Now, one of your best protections against that is that as few people as possible know your key emails that you're actually using to log into your government accounts, your CRA account, your Revenue Quebec account, or your banking accounts, or your trading account if you have a trading, right? So do not use that email account to sign up for these random, bonus offers or whatever. But it's still useful to have an email account that you can use to sign up for these bonus offers. So sometimes you can sign up for bonus offers that don't cost you anything, and then you're like once every couple of weeks, for example, you might get, for example, this is from the PC Optimum program. They essentially tell you, well, for every $75 that you're spending by buying things online, again, there you can no longer use the Flip app, but it saves you some time. We're going to give you 20,000 points. The fun thing is 1,000 points can be converted into, it's the equivalent of $1. So essentially they're saying if you're buying $75 worth, we're going to give you $20 credit to use then in the future when you're buying more groceries. So in this case, I essentially bought 25 items. Again, this is from last September or September 2024. So I bought 25 items, cost $90.93. At my store, there's a $3 pickup fee. Other stores don't have a pickup fee, but mine had one at the time. And you see, taxes were super low because most of those items were groceries, right? So almost nothing had tax on it, right? So tax overall were $2.34, and it cost me $96.26. And now this is an actual, image of the bill once I paid. So notice that I earned a bunch of extra points here for no name pasta that they had for sale. That was a discount. Potatoes had also some bonuses. Sometimes they give you extra ones. The $2.34 were because I bought some chocolates. So these Lind chocolates gave me $4 worth of bonuses, but I also had to pay $2.34 in tax. And part of it, again, it wasn't just for the chocolate, but that was part of it. Notice here, I've been talking about how the combined sales tax in Quebec is 14.975. That is true. Right now, I live in Ottawa. I do not live in Montreal. So Ottawa is in Ontario. Ontario has a harmonized sales tax. So in total, sales taxes are lower in Ontario. They're 13%. So in case you're wondering, why have I been talking about 14.975 when this thing says 13? That's why. It's because this bill was purchased at a local grocery store in Ottawa, which was, so that's why it's 13%, not 14.975. Anyway, long story short, cost me 96.27, which is, what roughly what they estimated here. But notice I used 50,000 points or $50 worth from a previous that I had earned previously. So I essentially only had to pay $46.27. And then you see, I redeemed 50,000 points, and then they gave me 30,000 points, between the 20,000 here and the additional ones that I earned over there, and additional bonus offers for that. So now I had another 41,930 points to use next time around. Okay. So, and again, the catch here is you can only redeem points in 10,000 point increments, essentially. Okay. So essentially I paid half price for this. Okay. Another like last two slides very quickly here. So another very useful little app that you can use is Flash Food. A whole bunch of different Montreal-based and again Canada-based stores are members of this. So the way this one works, there we go. There we go. The way this one works is essentially you get the app, and then it puts Ottawa because it said I'm in Ottawa right now, so that's why it shows you Ottawa instead of Montreal. Here we go, Montreal. Let's zoom in. Come on. Okay, no. Okay, again, this will work fine in your case again, just because we're a bit late here. Let me just type in Montreal there. Okay. No, not that. Okay, not Vancouver, Montreal. Okay, there we go. All right, so now you can basically see. So McGill is right here's Peel Street. See, McGill is right there. So there's two stores. There's other ones that are members of this. So the way it works is essentially in Canada, you're not allowed to sell food that is expired or that is, so you have to sell it before its best by date. Doesn't mean that the food is bad. It just means that it'll expire soon. So as a result, a lot of stores will essentially have massive discounts on food that is about to expire in the next couple of days. Now, obviously, if you're planning on eating that food a week from now, don't buy it. I don't want you to be buying discounted food and yet get food poisoning because now it's gone bad. But if you're about to cook tonight, does it really matter that it's good for another 10 days or 3 until cooked if you're cooking it tonight anyway, right? So a lot of times you will be able to get 30, 50, sometimes 75% off, especially on more expensive items such as meat, for example, if you're using this app. So yeah, it's fairly straightforward. Have a look at their website again, because I ran a bit long with my other examples. I cannot finish it, show you the example, but again, it's fairly easy to understand. I'm sure you guys are more smarter than enough to figure that one out. Again, if you need a card, this is just a useful set of things what to look for. Again, I wasn't really going to cover that. And again, these are so last slide I want to show you. So again, the reason cell phones are so expensive in Canada is because you essentially have three main players, these are the three main players: Rogers, TELUS, and Bell. And then you have the fourth sort of largest one that is specifically focused on Eastern Ontario and Quebec, which is Videotron, which is a Quebec-based company. So those are their prices are the highest, right? Because they're the premium service. They have their discounted brands. Fido is owned by Rogers, Koodo is owned by TELUS, Virgin Mobile is owned by Bell, Freedom Mobile is owned by Videotron. And then and then they have their fighter brands, which Chatter is owned by Rogers, Public Mobile is owned by TELUS, Lucky is owned by Bell, Fizz is owned by Videotron. Okay, so these are the cheapest brands. So the fighter brand is literally what they're the brand that they're using to undercut the other competitors. So if you're looking for the cheapest possible price, I'd recommend looking at these four, right? Again, personally, I'm using Fizz, but again, maybe you're looking for more data or whatever. So maybe, Lucky Mobile or Public Mobile or Chatter is better for you. If you're looking at premium service, a ton of 5G data and all that stuff, then yeah, the Rogers, TELUS, Bell, and Videotron, the main brands will have slightly larger packages for that. But they all will also be available in the smaller brands. But again, shop around, figure out what makes the most sense for you. A lot of times around specific holidays, Canada Day is coming up in a month, or on July 1st. They'll have special Canada Day for a week or two around Canada Day. They'll have special discounts like 20% off, or you might get special plans. So have a look at that. And I mentioned before, those are the plans if you want. Again, another reason I like to use Fizz is they have a whole bunch of extra bonuses that they give you randomly for nothing, and you're able to switch plans whenever. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, but again, that's my preference. You guys do you, right? And this is just like examples of how to pay off a credit card fast. I just put in this here in case we had the time, but it was never really it wasn't the plan really to get through this today. But read through this. I'll give you some ideas in terms of how to boost your credit score and how to use a credit card efficiently. I go in a lot more detail about that in the sessions. That's sort of a preview of some of the content of some of the slides that I have in those winter and spring sessions. Okay, but if you cannot attend those sessions, at least you have the summaries of some of the main takeaways from those. Okay, all right. So in closing, budgeting is an important first step to the road of financial stability. Properly budgeting can help you achieve both short and long-term goals. And then once you have positive cash flow, you need to set up a financial plan. And then again, small changes today can have a massive impact down the line. So check out the financial skills webinar series in the winter and as well as in the fall. And that one again, these are the webinars that are offered. I don't know which ones will be offered next semester necessarily. All right, so sorry for going a few minutes over time here, guys, but I hope that was informative and useful nonetheless. Any questions, by the way? I can type them in chat. Sorry, I just got a bunch of messages and pop-ups.
We do have a few questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So I've answered a couple of them already with quick links for the ones that I was able to answer.
Yeah.
We do have a question about recommended brands.
Yes.
Any brands that you recommend? You already mentioned a little bit about some discounts, some sites that are helpful to get discounts. So those links are already in the Q&A. But if you have any recommendations of brands or any low-cost supermarkets or shops to buy daily groceries was also a question that I saw.
That's a great question. So I probably in the future I should include a link on that too. So one other reason why Canada, the grocery prices, sometimes they feel like they're moving in sync a bit too much, is because something very similar to what you see here with the telecom providers also happens at the grocery store level. In other words, there might seem like there's 30 different brands of different stores in Canada, and there are some small local ones for sure. The reality, however, is the big chain stores have much more purchasing power. As a result, they will typically have the lowest prices. But even there, some will have better prices than others. So, and the reason for this is because there are just essentially 4 or 5 companies that own most of the other chain stores in Canada. Okay, so Loblaws, for example, owns Provigo, owns Maxi, owns Independent Grocers, owns like about 6 or 7 of the major brands underneath them. Metro owns Super C, and a few other ones as well. A lot of the stuff that Metro owns actually is not really available in Quebec because, again, Quebec has different rules and regulations. So the important thing is to figure out this sort of hierarchy, right? Essentially, which is the main brand, and whatever the main brand is, when it comes to a grocery store, they will have the slightly nicer stores. They will have slightly more diversity and options in terms of what are your, if you're looking for fresh produce or something like that, right? But the prices will also match the slightly nicer, everything, because they have to pay a bit more upkeep. They have to pay a bit more for all of that. So the easiest way to figure out which one are the less expensive ones, I would say, again, depending on your area. Usually Metro and Super C will have slightly, and Maxi will have slightly lesser prices than their parent companies, if you will. Okay. Super C and Maxi, I would say, are probably the 2 cheapest ones. Obviously, if you're able to, and that's why I mentioned very briefly, it's written on the slide. I just didn't spend time on it because, again, I was running a bit late. So apologies for that one more time. Where was it? So something like Club Entrepôt, which is, by the way, is also owned by Loblaws. They allow you, they're essentially a large discount store where you're just buying things in bulk. The downside of them, there's only I think 2 of them in Montreal, 1 or 2 of them in Montreal, because they used to be a second set. There's this one in La Salle, which is pretty close to Angrignon Metro, so that's not terrible. But it's not the most convenient thing to get to from McGill, right? Because it's here, McGill is there, it's all the way here, right? But if you have a friend that has a car, that would be ideal, right? And the nice thing about it is you do not need, as far as I know, you do not need a membership. So Costco, there's like 6 or 7 of them around Montreal, but you need a yearly membership that costs like 70-80 bucks for the basic membership. Double that if you also want to get some cashback rewards. If you're spending enough money, the executive membership might make sense, but probably not, depending on how much you're spending. So long story short, you will get the best deals if you're buying in bulk, but if you don't have space to store it, don't buy things that are perishable in bulk, because then you're going to waste your money, right? But if you're not able to get to the few locations where you might have, and this is just one example of this wholesale club location, the Club Entrepôt, or there's a Costco around here in downtown Montreal, a bit closer to McGill, but not the most efficient thing to get there. And again, because Costco, you buy large things in bulk, you're probably going to have to get an Uber back, because going around with a giant box of food from Costco is, on the metro is going to be very comfortable and convenient. But yeah, so that's what I would say would be sort of some of the less expensive places. Sometimes for fruits and veg, some of the smaller local, truly independent, they're called fruiterie, like it's literally fruit stores and veggie stores, might have deals when certain things are in season, but not always. Atwater Market is another option where you can buy local produce from local farmers. You have a lot of variety, and especially those of you that like to buy organic and local produce stuff, that's a great place. Same thing with Atwater Market, which is also relatively close to McGill. The downside with these markets, especially since the pandemic, prices have gone up exponentially, even more so than in stores. So they used to be on par, sometimes a bit cheaper, sometimes a bit more expensive than the stores. Now they're quite a bit more expensive than the stores. But again, it depends on your budget and your finances. So I hope that kind of covered the the question.
Amazing, thank you. I just also wanted to, I know the question was deleted, but there was also a question about household items, and Dollarama is also a really good place to go for that. There's also a question here about purchasing a new Canadian number, if it is really necessary, or if roaming with their home number for significantly lower prices is enough.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. So it all depends on how you're communicating with people, right? Because again, getting a Canadian number, and as I said, you can probably get some of the cheapest deals are going to be something like probably close to $20 a month if you need the phone number for actual someone to call you. When you're making an appointment, right? If you're making an appointment for a doctor, or you're making an appointment to anything that someone has to call you back to confirm, not all places will call you back if it's an international number. Like, you might run into problems with that, right? Most financial institutions, depending on the type of account that you're setting up, sometimes they'll be okay with you giving them an international number. Other times they'll outright refuse you service. They'll be like, sorry, you need a Canadian number to be able. So I would say double check what types of accounts you want to open up, and verify who is likely to be contacting you, right? Because if you're telling the government of Quebec to call you back because something happens, they're unlikely to call you on an international line. Typically, I'm just warning you. The Revenue Quebec is very weird. Sometimes they even refuse to send me, because when I moved to Ontario from Quebec, I used to live in Montreal for like 27 years of my life, and then when we moved to Ottawa during the pandemic, the Revenue Quebec had to send me some files. They refused to ship it to Ontario. They're like, we need a Quebec address. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, anyway, there's some really weird stuff. I'm not saying they will never ship anything anywhere else, but yeah, just don't be surprised if sometimes there's some unnatural resilience and resistance to call you and use an international number. So you might run into those issues in certain cases. But yeah, for most things, you'd be okay with an international number. But if you're literally using it for the bare minimum, you can get one of those. Again, Fizz will have some of the cheaper ones. Chatter will have some of the cheaper ones. Get a pay-as-you-go plan where basically you're just paying like a flat $10 fee or something like that per, and you can just get the Quebec only plan. You pay like a $10 per month fee just to get the Canadian number, essentially. And then they'll work just in Quebec. And if you're using it just for people to call you, so you can set up all the other accounts, because if the type of account you set up requires a Canadian number, Again, depending on the type of account you open. Some don't require it, some do require it, right? You definitely avoid, paying $80 a month for the Bell fancy plan if you don't need the fancy plan because you already have your home country number that you can use, and you have unlimited international roaming or whatever it is, right? So you can sort of find one of those compromises where you spend as little as possible, but you might still end up having to open one. And one little comment about Dollarama, I do agree that for most things, Dollarama is going to be useful if you're just buying, if you just need one thing. But at the same time, the quality also kind of goes hand in hand with, depending on what you're buying. Certain things, Dollarama, no problem. Other things, let's just say, be forewarned. Sometimes something that costs you $5 or $10 at Canadian Tire, for example, let's say you're getting a bottle opener, right? I once bought a bottle opener when I was an undergrad at Dollarama for like $1. It broke literally the second time I used it, right? Whereas I bought another one from Canadian Tire right afterwards. I still have it now 15 years later. Okay, so certain things, like if you're looking at how long does it last for the amount of money that you're paying for it. Sometimes Dollarama is not the best solution, but for certain things, again, shop around. But I would say yes, Dollarama for certain things, for sure, great. For other things, you end up overspending just because the quality is not there. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's all of the questions. I don't see anything else that went unanswered.
Okay,
So someone
perfect.
answered in the comments directly. So if you have any last minute questions, that would be the time. Otherwise, you can always reach out to either Alex or myself as well.
Excellent. Well, again, I hope you guys found today's session useful. And again, you have my email on the very first slide of the slide deck, which again, the slides will be emailed out to you guys shortly. And then, have a great summer in the meantime. And perhaps I'll see you at some of the sessions either next semester or in the spring semester. And again, welcome to McGill. And I hope you guys will have some amazing times in Montreal.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Alex, for delivering this incredible presentation. Have a great
You're
day,
welcome.
everybody.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.